Story time. A girl named Akira Kendrick sent me this story, and the background of it is that her dad was very abusive to her mother, and her mother got custody of Akira, and her dad was not happy about that. Anyway, so Akira was with her aunt and her cousins at her grandmother's house, all on her mother's side, and her dad stops by to say hello. And Akira's outside playing with her cousin, and her dad comes up to her and grabs her arm and says, "Do you want to go to Walmart with me?" And at the time, she's only 7, so all she hears is toy aisle, so she says, "Yes, let's go." So they get in the car, they head to Walmart, she gets some really nice pom-poms, and then he says, "Okay, let's go back to your grandmother's house." So he starts driving and he gets on the highway, and Akira knows that her grandmother's house is right around the corner from Walmart, so he does not need to get on the highway. So she says, "Dad, where are we going?" And he gets really mad and says, "Shut up, sit down, it does not matter." So Akira's in the back seat, she's really scared, and she just shuts her mouth. So after being in the car for a while, they eventually arrived at this really old, abandoned, beat up house. And when they walk in, Akira sees about 25 people and she does not know any of them. Her dad brings her to a room, puts her in a little closet, throws her some toys and her pom-poms and says, "Play." Part 2 of Akira's dad literally kidnapping her. So when they get to the house, Akira is really scared. She doesn't know any of these 25 people. Her dad brings her to a room, throws her in a closet, puts some toys in there and says, "Play." So after about an hour of being in a little closet with some toys, she finally decides to get up and go look for her dad. So she opens the door and starts looking around, and there is no one in the house. There's not even a single trace of somebody ever being there. So of course she starts freaking out and crying. She doesn't know where she is. She's so far away from her grandmother's house, and she doesn't have a phone. And so eventually, after 3 hours, she hears somebody. She looks up and her dad is standing there, and he says, "Come on, let's go, the cops are outside." So basically, Akira's aunt called the cops and they had a search warrant for him. They ended up finding her dad and they said to him, "If you don't take us to her, you will go to jail." And obviously, from what I just said, he finally took them to her at this random old abandoned house, and they found her. And they ended up putting him in jail anyways, because why not? 2 years in jail and 1 year on probation. Don't steal children, people.
Story time on how my parents forced me into acting. I played roles that were on TV networks like Disney Channel and Nickelodeon. And I also did PBS Kids and a few other networks. As a child actor, my parents expected a lot from me. The roles that I played would pay the bills at home. When I was younger and I was acting, I didn't know that money came with it. So whenever I did act, if anything that had to do with money, my parents would handle it. And still to this day, I haven't seen that money. But anyways, so during my time of acting, my parents put me in acting classes, singing, and dancing. They really wanted me to be that triple threat, but when it came to these shows that I played in, I would never get the main character. I'd always be casted like an extra that had a few lines. When I finally got my big break, I was casted in the Hannah Montana show. But you will not believe what my parents had to do for me to get that role. Part 2 on how my parents forced me into acting. So finally, I got a major role in a Hannah Montana show. For my role, I necessarily didn't audition. My parents built up a contract and forced my signature. In order for me to play the role, there were certain things that I had to do. When it came to getting clothes, I had to make sure I bought my clothes. With the money that I made at my previous acting jobs, I had to make sure my own makeup was done, had to make sure my own hair was done, and I also had to do janitor work, as in sweep, mop the floors. Maybe a good 2 months before the show had started, I had to get the stage set up and, the scene. 2 months of working and not really getting paid for it. The head of Disney had found out about the contract and forced to sue my parents if they had continued with it. After the whole situation, I never got the role. And I put all that work in for no compensation and no role.
This is a warning about a woman called the Candy Lady. They say that if you grew up in small town Texas, you've probably heard of her before. The Candy Lady allegedly lures children to their doom by leaving enticing goodies on their windowsills just before bedtime. Her plan is basically to wait until the mom and dad fall asleep. She'll then place the treats on the window, the kids will go over and eat them, and then she'll grab the kids and feast on their sugar-laden blood. Children began to go missing, yet no leads were ever found that would suggest they were kidnapped or ran away. And a sheriff who had been investigating the disappearances actually turned up dead. His eyes were missing and his pockets were stuffed with candy. A farmer also found a child-sized set of teeth inside a candy wrapper one morning while tending to his fields. So people wonder, was this story just crafted by clever parents to scare their kids into not taking candy from strangers? Or maybe the Candy Lady really is real and is out looking for her next victim right now.